Hi everybody, welcome to the launch of No Small Shame by Christine Bell. I'm Alison Goodman and it is my honour to be launching Christine's debut novel. Now I have a fairly unstable internet connection, so if I happen to pause or freeze, Christine's going to wave at me. Hopefully I won't be freezing with jaw hanging out of my mouth. Hi Christine! I think we're already freezing. So No Small Shame was set to be launched at readings tonight, but of course circumstances have drastically changed for all of us. Readings, however, have kindly offered a 10% discount each week on those books that were scheduled to be launched at their bookshops during that week. More details on that offer and other places you can locate your copy of No Small Shame at the end of the launch. Now, Christine and I are in our own houses during this time of isolation. So I wish to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Christine?
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, and I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, both past and present.
Christine and I decided that a more dynamic format for this launch would be in order. So what I'll be doing a short interview with Christine about her novel, and then I'll be calling speech, and Christine will take the floor. I will then officially launch No Small Shame. Let me just hold up this beautiful book. There we go.
Yeah.
So here it is, years of hard work for Christine, as well as years of joy and probably some tears. Publishing a debut novel is a huge achievement, and I've been privileged to be part of some of Christine's process as she's brought this beautifully written and exquisitely researched story of Mary O'Donnell and her early immigrant experience to the page and into our lives. It's published by Ventura Press, the Impact imprint, and I wanted to read you the back blurb before Christine gives us a reading from the book. Australia, 1914. The world is erupting in war. Jobs are scarce and immigrants unwelcome. For young Catholic Mary O'Donnell, this is not the new life she imagined. When one foolish night of passion leads to an unexpected pregnancy and a loveless marriage, Mary's reluctant husband Liam escapes to the trenches. With her overbearing mother attempting to control her every decision, Mary flees to Melbourne, determined to build a life for herself and her child. There, she forms an unlikely friendship with Protestant army reject, Tom Robbins. But as a shattering betrayal is revealed, Mary must make an impossible choice. Does she embrace the path fate has set for her, or follow the one she longs to take? From the harshness of a pit village in Scotland to the upheaval of wartime Australia, No Small Shame tells a moving story of love and duty, loyalty and betrayal, and confronting the past before you can seek a future. Christine, would you like to read from the novel for us so that we can get a flavour for your beautiful writing?
Thank you. Thank you, Al. Right. I'd just like to read a little bit from the very beginning of the novel, the opening scene. Hamilton Palace Colliery, Bothwell Hall, Scotland, October 1909. Can you not try again to change your Da's mind, Liam? Mary sucked her lips between her teeth, as much to stop her shivering, the night damp soaking cold through her skirt, as worry over the misery beast sitting beside her. She could scarcely make out Liam's expression in the growing dusk, but his scowl came clear enough when he glared back at her. Da won't listen. Da never listens. He wants me underground, same as every other beggar in the palace, scraping a few shillings in the dark, same as him. Liam kicked out at a hunk of rock, sending it into the deepening shadows at the bottom of the coal bin. Da just don't want me to raise myself up to be better than him. He's afraid I'll do things he never even thought to do. Well, I will too, first chance I get. No one's keeping me underground. Mary shrugged helplessly, nothing left to say. The argument of months between Liam and his Da could go to the highest court in the land, but there was no getting around it or changing Joe Merrilies' mind. 14 tomorrow, Liam would be starting down the pit, as expected. He was only sitting there beside her now because he was unable to tell his pals, them all happy to be out of school and most of them down the pit too. How would Liam bear it? The boy who laughed out loud at the wind messing in his hair and found animals and faces in clouds, same as her. The same boy who'd call her outdoors in the bitterest winter cold rather than be cooped up inside. How could that boy bear to go down into the dark? How could she bear to watch him go? She searched for words to show herself equal to his misery, prove herself determined as him. More ain't sending me to work on the dirty pithead or keeping me home waiting on marriage and babies neither. Yeah? Yeah. Mary flushed at the note of admiration in Liam's tone. The 3 years between them evaporated in that shared moment, emboldening her to vow, I'm going to be a teacher one day in a school, or a nurse in a snowy white uniform. That's what I'm going to do. Liam nodded back at her keenly then, like he really believed she could do whatever she wanted, instead of what Moore said. In that moment, she almost believed it herself. Swear on it, said Liam. Let's make an oath, right here, right now. He jiggled about, trying to wrestle something out of his waistcoat pocket. A flash of metal glinted as he grabbed up her hand. Jesus, Liam, what are you doing? It's a blood oath. Hold still now, will you? A sudden sting on her palm stole the gasp out of her mouth. When the burn began in earnest, she bit back tears as much for the spatter on her skirt and Moore's tirade coming as the pain piercing her flesh. Oh, it ain't that bad. Liam brushed away the solitary tears sliding down her cheek. Against reason, his gentleness made her want to bawl harder. He might have scoffed at her sucking, only he didn't. Instead, he tugged a crumpled handkerchief from his vest and dabbed the drips off her fingers. You're okay now, my turn. When he took up her hand again, he pressed the slippery wetness of his own palm against hers. Now repeat after me, but put your own name in instead of mine. I, Liam merrily, swear I will raise myself up to be better than me dar and more, live the life I want, go where I want, do what I want, not be beholden to anyone else's orders or example, be me own man. Mary giggled at the last. Oh, you say girl then, just say it, will you? Me hand aches from holding it up so long. Mary repeated the words, trying not to burst out laughing or give away she'd happily hold up her hand all night just to feel the warmth of Liam's palm against hers, even if blood dripped fair down her armpit. Come on, your more will be hurling the poker if you're not indoors by full dark.
Thank you. So we're going to go into the interview part of our launch now. And I was fascinated to learn that the kernel of the idea for no small shame comes from your family history. Now, how did you come across that history and why did it bloom into Mary's story?
Well, at the time, I just started a novel in the February year of the novel. And then at the same time, I was researching my family history and trying to get the family line. And I was asking a lot of questions about that. And my great-grandparents came originally, they moved from Ireland and came to Scotland, and they spent 10 years there. And then they immigrated from their very poor pit village of Bothwell Hall to the Wonthaggi State Coal Mine in Victoria. So I went to the Wonthaggi State Coal Mine to sort of investigate that history. And because I was so invested in the story of their lives, which was not much of a story, I must say, but it was their background, all the way through every exhibit, I kept hearing this little voice say, there's a story here, and what a setting, what a background. But when I went home and I interrogated my mother further, she really didn't have much to tell me. They lived a very quiet, ordinary life. They were very ordinary people. And so they didn't have much of a story. But I couldn't stop researching Bothwell Hall, which I was fascinated with, and also the steamship journey. And instead of focusing on the story I was supposed to be writing, I started making a lot of notes, and then thinking there must be a character, and then Mary turned up, and that notebook started to grow, and eventually I just had to give in and say, okay, this is the story I really want to write, and shifted novels in Year of the Novel midstream.
Yep, yeah. Thank you for doing that, because what we have is no small shame. So it's No Small Shame is a story of the brutal collision of religion, poverty, and society. And although it is Mary's story, we also see the after effect of war on the returning soldiers, and by extension, on the women in their lives. Was this well documented, or did you have to do a lot of digging to find that sort of those heartbreaking but really fascinating details that are in the novel?
I did have to do a lot of digging to get the women's perspective, because there's lots of documentation of the men and the actual war. There's not as much, but there are still a lot of stories of when they returned, but they don't focus on what life was like for the wives. And I think there's so much about the Anzac heroes, and they came back to life and back to their families, but what we don't realise until I started doing a lot of research anyway, is that a lot of those families never ever recovered or resumed normal lives, because so many of the men were damaged. They weren't all having such horrific shell shock that they had to be hospitalised or institutionalised, but it did have severe impacts on their family, both either through their injuries or their shock or post-traumatic shock. And a lot of the evidence was in letters that women wrote to base records, that conducted many of the affairs of the soldiers in Australia, and they often were the ones who were begging for assistance or to have the pensions reassessed. And I found an invaluable book that was written around that time by Marina Larson called Shattered Anzacs. And that non-fiction book, that was based on many interviews with offspring of those men and their return, and it did document their lives, and it gave me a huge insight into what those families went through, and as well as a great insight to how their pension system worked, because I assumed they got a pension, but they used to decide the pensions on the basis of the man's injuries. So if he came home and he had a certain percentage of injuries and was incapacitated to a certain extent, they paid him the full pension or half pension, but then as he improved, that pension got cut down. But often those men couldn't find work, or were mentally unable to work or hold down a job. So the women really had to come to the fore, and they were often the advocates and carers as much as wives and mothers.
Yeah.
Or the man that was injured. But through, I tried not to read a lot of fiction based on that at the time when I was writing. I didn't want to be influenced by other people's stories. But it was really through diaries and actually family accounts that really helped clue me into what it was really like, because a lot of the time it makes it seem as if they all came back and moved on and lived good lives, but the percentages are really quite shocking, how many didn't.
Well, I assume that also helped you find the voice of Mary, because with all the uncertainty and lack of control in our lives at the moment, I really found I identified with Mary as she struggles to make her own life. So you are creating the mindset of a young Catholic working class immigrant woman in wartime Australia. So can you talk a bit about that process of creating that wonderful voice of Mary? She's incredibly vulnerable, but also this core of strength in her as well, which I found just enthralling to read, that, you are so behind Mary as she goes through her life, and as we go through that emotional journey with her. And it truly is an emotional journey, and one that really I found to be uh, immensely heart-wrenching, but also satisfying.
Well, I think that it probably helped that I had a Catholic background, and so, there's a lot of parallels there between even what life was like growing up in the 60s and 70s, as there was within families of expectations, etc. So that really helped for a start. I must admit, I did draw a lot on my mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law, who she had her teenagers years just after the war, but she had so many stories about what it was like trying to go to work at such a young age and how difficult that was. And I think originally she was asked to stay home, told she had to stay home. She was one of 8 children, and she had to leave school, stay home, help her mother with the younger children. But in short time, they discovered she was pretty useless, she said, at home to help. So she was packed off to work, but she wasn't yet 14. So they doctored her birth certificate to get her to go to work. But, and also my mum.
Sorry, did you just say that they doctored her birth certificate to get her to go to work?
Yes. It went on all the time. That often happened when they couldn't afford to keep the kids at school. So, she revealed a lot of things to me about how tough those days were. And my own grandmother had her stories too about what it was. But I did look at different diaries and family histories. And once you start looking, there's quite a lot of anthologies and historical societies, etc., that put through booklets that show the life of people in that historical society. So they really helped to get me into the mindset. But I found that, once I had the place and the time, I was able to, a lot of what Mary felt became very natural to her character. And having gone through my own rebellion against the expectations and the Catholic religion in my teen years, I was able to bring a bit of that in, of her looking about her and saying, this is what I'm being told, but this is what I'm seeing. So questioning the truth. So I think that all helped.
No Small Shame is also the story of a mother and a daughter. Mary's mother, or Moore as she's called throughout the book, is an antagonist in every sense of the word. There were times in the novel when I just wanted to slap her. But also I felt the tragedy of her situation as well, which is a testament to your skill and beautiful writing. So what do you feel is at the core of Moore and Mary's relationship?
Sorry, could you just say that again? I lost you for the question.
Sure. What do you feel is at the core of Moore and Mary's relationship?
I think they have very polar expectations. And I think that Mary is in a generation that was just suddenly starting to shift. Suddenly this little light was going on that there is more and out there, not, forgive the pun, more out there for her than just the life that she's expected to lead. But it was the very early days of women thinking that. And more, I think, as hard and harsh as she was at times, I think she really did love Mary and her children. But that friction of both wanting different things, whereas Moore felt that she was protecting Mary to be safe and not to be hurt by having expectations beyond her station. Moore never aspired to anything more. And the one time, I won't give away that will give away something from the story.
No spoilers.
But I think Moore was very accepting of her lot, and Mary was very much a dreamer and had aspirations, and they were always going to have that rub and that friction together because they were never going to agree. But of course, in the beginning of the story, Mary's very young. She's only 15, and she has to go through a lot to be able to actually stand up and say what I want. And it was a big journey, as you know, for her to get to that point. But yes, I think the crucial thing between them was that they had very different expectations of what life should give them. And I don't think Moore had quite got into the idea of happiness. That was not an expectation.
No. Well, that was fascinating as the book. So what I'd like to know is invite you to speak to the world and what you would like to say about No Small Shame.
Thank you, Al. Well, you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to have to read some of this speech, and this is probably very similar to what I would have done if I was at readings. But this is quite different from what I imagined that this night to be. And my apologies that we couldn't work the tech to do this live from two separate houses. But here we are, surrounded by, I hope, lots of friends, family, fellow writers. Since you've heard how the idea for the book originated, I thought I'd tell you a bit about its journey. It's been a very long journey, as many family members and fellow writers will attest. I began this book way back in 2008, in Year of the Novel class. I'd only written one novel previously, also part of a course, and that was also written over several years. It was a huge shift for me to go from writing the short fiction that I'd been published in for children to writing an epic novel for adults spanning 7 years, 2 continents, multiple characters, and a world war. I'm not sure that I'd have started had I realised how big that task was going to be. And at times I did become a little overwhelmed and wonder if I was up to it. But I had a lot of support and feedback along the way that assured me that I was on track and to keep going. All very vital and necessary encouragement. I began my master's in 2010, planning to finish the novel by graduation. I'd begun the writing just wanting to tell a great story. But it was through my degree that I realised the book had to be about more. Not more the mother, more than just a great story. But by graduation, I still struggled over whether I'd really said what I wanted to say. And it quickly became evident by feedback from the first literary agent I approached and the first professional reader that the book was missing a focus. I was quite overwhelmed at that point because I really thought that it was finished. But I didn't know how to rewrite or redirect it, so I put it aside for a couple of years and wrote a YA historical novel instead. But my love and belief in the story never wavered. It was never far from my thoughts. And 2 years later, I returned to the manuscript with the realisation that it was okay to write about ordinary people and ordinary lives, but I had a new, stronger idea of my character's journey and motivations and what I wanted to say. I knew that I wanted to show the small steps ordinary women had to take towards gaining agency in their lives. Not every emerging feminist is feisty or loud or able to change the trajectory of their lives through protest or rebellion. Even then, it took me some time to truly articulate what I wanted to do. I knew too that I needed to let some light into what was essentially a quite dark manuscript. It's still not a holiday romp in the park, but I was determined to tell a story that was authentic to its time and people. I wanted to write about an ordinary woman living an ordinary life at a time of extraordinary circumstances and great cultural shifts. I had questions. What did that life look like? How did women begin to break free of the strictures of church, family, and society? I decided for women of the working class, it could only be done by very small steps. By me writing the novel too, it seems. But now, all these years later, happily my current work in progress won't take nearly as long to finish as I've set it over just 1 year. I need to thank so many people who've contributed to this book. Firstly, I want to thank my friend and fellow writing buddy, Alison Goodman, for launching No Small Shame so beautifully and eloquently as always. I especially thank Elle for her support and calm reassurance over recent days when the world and this launch went pear-shaped, and for helping to rearrange our original plan for tonight. My acknowledgements in the book run to 3 pages, which I'm not going to make you sit through. And after it was printed, I realised I'd still neglected to thank some early readers of the first draft. So now, to ensure I miss no one, thank you to everyone who's ever read or given feedback on this novel. You've all contributed invaluably to the finished book. I must also rectify another omission in the printed acknowledgements and thank Christabella Designs, who created the gorgeous cover of No Small Shame. It's received so much love and admiration, both to me personally and on Facebook and Instagram, and I am absolutely thrilled with it. I want to thank every one of my wonderful endorsers for their kind words and enthusiasm for this story. Thank you, Kate Milden-Hall, Lauren Chater, Jane Sullivan, Christine Ballant, and Nadine Davidoff. You're all my heroes for reading such a long book and giving your wonderful words of praise to No Small Shame. An extra special thank you to Nadine Davidoff. Your belief, encouragement, and support for the manuscript at a crucial time helped fuel my belief it was publishable. I am so fortunate and grateful to have the brilliant support, friendship, and invaluable feedback of 2 wonderful writing groups, Elizabeth Jane Corbett, Lisa Layton, and Laura Einak, and the Young and Jackson's Writers Group, Alison Goodman, Matt Davies, Karen McKenzie, Adam Flett, and during the writing, Judy Crozier. Thank you all for all your encouragement and belief, fabulous feedback, and of course, tea, wine, and on occasions, tissues. I want to make special mention here of my dear friend, Elizabeth Jane Corbett. Liz and I shared a friendship and the same writing group for many years, a love of historical fiction and research, and so many conversations about the progress of our novels and our writing journeys. So much shared joy, angst, fear, and hope. Liz read my full manuscript several times, and I am forever grateful for her gentle, yet astute and wise feedback. Bless you, Liz. I am sorry that you didn't get to see the manuscript turned into this beautiful book. Thank you so much to Zoe Hale, Sophie Hodge, Holly Jeffrey, and Jane Curry of Ventura Press for your enthusiasm to publish No Small Shame, and for your wonderful expertise and collaborative process. You made it all so easy. Special thanks and much love to my children, Matthew, Sarah, and Daniel, who followed the long journey of this book with love, patience, and continued interest. Special thanks to Sarah Bell for the many conversations and brainstorming sessions during the early development of the plot, which invariably helped me discover and articulate my aims for the greater narrative. And for all Sarah's recent efforts, designing my launch invitations and business cards, and acting as my own personal comms editor. My everlasting love and gratitude to my husband, Bruce, for his unflagging belief in both the story and my writing, and for all his encouragement and company over several research trips. I don't think it was that big a stretch for him. Thank you for loving Mary nearly as much as I do. I want to so sincerely thank too the amazing writing community who've reached out to offer so many fabulous online opportunities, to those of us with new book releases who's had launches and events cancelled. Your support and promotion will hopefully save our books from sinking in this maelstrom and have given No Small Shame an online exposure that I couldn't have hoped for. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. That was lovely. I have now the privilege, the honour, the joy to officially launch No Small Shame into the world. Congratulations, Chris.
Thank you very much, Elle. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Now we're going to have a plate at the end, or some details about where you can locate your copy of No Small Shame. And as we said before, Readings has offered a 10% discount during this week for No Small Shame. So go forth and spread the word.
And enjoy.
And enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.